I am 39, turning 40 soon. I grew up in the southwest of Germany in a small town called Heidelberg. Heidelberg is funny because it has a cool hip-hop scene, actually, like a German hip-hop scene, more underground hip-hop. I was in high school, and when you're in high school, you're into what's cool. Always wonder, like, how do they make those beats? Basically sample-based, MPCs, samplers. They had a record store where I could shop for music. I was more into jazz music before I got into electronic music. I studied jazz, I'm a jazz musician. Hip-hop was the first time I experienced music being made not on instruments. I come from a musical family. My parents are not musicians. They are teachers. I have 5 siblings, so lots of kids in the house, and there was a piano, and everyone was kind of playing around on the piano. And I got into music per se through a lot of through the record collection from my grandfather, a really nice kind of jazz collection. And as a kid, I think I was like probably 6, 7, 8 years old or something like that. I would go through those records and be like, who is this trumpet player? And research Joe Henderson, Miles Davis, whatever, Sarah Vaughan, all those vocalists. I picked those up and I asked my dad, hey, can I bring those home? My grandfather kind of didn't listen to it anymore, getting older and wasn't so much into the music of the 50s. Bebop, swing music, some nice Verve collections, lots of cool jazz from the 50s, like post-war cool jazz stuff. I really appreciate the history of music of the last 100 years. When I picked up those records and listened to them at home, I would tell my mom, like, hey, I want to become a musician. I was really, really, really into music. I forced my mom to get me a saxophone. First I was doing classic music through French horn, then got a saxophone and started transcribing those things. So you just put a record on and try to play it. Like the simple stuff, like obviously what John Coltrane is doing is very hard to play when you're 12 years old, but I was trying, and there's some solos you can play. I had a teacher, and then got into a more classical training, and my parents took it seriously and supported me in that. Because I was so into it and a little bit introverted, or very likely I was like a bit of a shy kid, I really sharpened my skills pretty quickly. This is also when I moved to Berlin as a teenager with my parents. And then pretty quickly it was like, okay, I'm going to be making music the rest of my life. Went straight to the conservatory, following an education to become a musician, a classic jazz musician. Now, when you grow up in Berlin, there's parties every weekend. We were students. We would be studying during the week and then on the weekend go party. And listening to Zip play this stuff, or Kerry Chandler, seeing Kerry Chandler play live at Panorama Bar. That left an impression, shit, I'm studying this music from the 50s, but it's 2005. What is the jazz of today? And until today, I'm now 40, this is 20 years later, I'm still thinking about that question. What is the jazz of today? The jazz of today is being played in clubs just like it was in the 40s. Like in the 1940s, people would go out to get drunk in a club, and forget about the war, forget about their issues. Just like we need that outlet today in the electronic music scene to create environments, safe environments where people can let themselves go and celebrate life. We needed that outlet, we needed those parties, and we needed to have fun. It's a university environment, so it's a little bit like stiff. I was kind of bored in a way, You'd be like playing the music from the 50s. It's incredible music, and I still listen to mostly to non-electronic music at home with my son, for example. Nothing against that, but I gotta find out how to write my own music. I don't want to just repeat the shit that it was done half a century ago. Right? I would still recommend everyone to study music. Go into depth. You're going to use what you learn to do your own thing. My curiosity about technology plays a big role in this. Quite interested in technology and progress. The trumpet was involved. People were like, what the heck is this thing? Someone blows into a trumpet and they're like, what? Now, there's lots of stuff here where people don't understand what it is, but it's technically not a whole lot different than the person who invented the trumpet or invented the saxophone or invented other instruments. There are instruments in this room that are like a trumpet. What progress is happening today that I can use that is just as crazy as a trumpet 100 years ago, and to what extent can I use that to make my own music, write my own modern jazz in a way? So my very first Synth was a Moog Little Fatty, I remember that, and a German company, Virus TI, and it's a digital emulation, whereas the Moog is analog. And I was already kind of thinking, okay, I will want different flavors, right? But I was always a guy who loves to make music with my hands and listen with my ears rather than with this thing. It's a great invention. It's a big instrument, this thing, but it's very one-sided. You're clicking boxes, you know, like you're clicking boxes in a numeric system inside of a computer. The fact that I came from classic music has helped me, I think, I would say. Now, is it necessary? Definitely not. There's incredible DJs and producers out there who did not study classic music or jazz, and they're amazing. It's not a necessity. You know, we would go to Berghain every weekend, and then I would literally go home. I had a little home studio, right? Like, there's a bed and 2 speakers and a synth, and Ableton 1 was installed on this. It's amazing to think back to this. Ableton 1 didn't even have MIDI. There was no MIDI incorporated in that software. It was basically like a looper, a pitch looper thing, where you could record yourself. I would build these beats, you know, basically without knowing really what I'm doing, because I was studying jazz music. I didn't really spend so much energy into understanding how a DAW works. Once MIDI was incorporated in Ableton, it was like a bit of more of a flow. We had a Rhodes and I had a Wurlitzer already at that time, so we would like jam and play stuff through microphones and stuff. We were just making beats and beats and beats, and then my first record actually came out on a small label called Kalpets. Shout out to Torsten at this point. We threw a bunch of tracks we burned a CD, you know, you were burning CDs. We would go to record stores and leave the CD in the record store. And just leave him on the counter. Or this was time of MySpace, so I get a message on MySpace from this guy Torsten saying, hey, I picked up your burned CD and the tracks are great and I would like to release 3 of them. And I'm kind of like, who are you? You know, like I didn't even know who he was. And then turns out he was, his partner, Chica Paula, is the sister of Dandy Jack, who produced music with Ricardo Villalobos. And we put our first record out there. We were kids, we were 21. Soon got really excited, obviously, to do our own label, and then just started pumping out our own music and trying to see what does work and what doesn't. Pearl Crew was our crew we hung out with and looked up to, we learned from. I was a kid and looked up to these guys, and they started playing it too. So I guess it's just an organic way of growing in that regard. More wild, even. It was incredible. There was also live acts, a lot of very prominent artists getting together and just plugging stuff in. Berlin in particular was not as hyped. There was no content generation. People weren't creating content. They were trying things out and hopefully pressing record. You were jamming, you were going to CDV and witnessing DJ sets for days that were not recorded, or they were just happening in the moment. I feel like it's a lot different now. I don't want to, open a can of worms, but people are very early on in their early 20s. They're looking already on how to create a career, as in, how do I get to something? At that point, it felt a lot more, these guys were just having fun. They were just doing incredible stuff because they were enjoying doing it. How do I make that next killer track in order to get me from here to there? Does that make any sense? At that time, it was a bit more just trying things out and seeing where it leads to, and genuine curiosity, I'm gonna say it this way. Genuine curiosity rather than producing something with a goal in mind. What's really beautiful in the example of Perlon is that their growth, it wasn't this, no one knows them and all of a sudden they blow up. It was an organic growth. What's really beautiful in some of these developments, and the question is amazing that you're asking, is that it's not this like you become a star overnight. Because if you become a star overnight, you also pretty quickly, you can fall very quickly as well, Being a more organic growth curve, it's more stable, These people are still playing at an incredible level, being at 50 plus. I have a lot of respect for that. I have a lot of respect for that, for people who have patience and not needing to get to something very quickly, because that can also hurt, that can crash pretty quickly as well. So slow and steady, that's sexy. You see it also with Richie, you see it with Ricardo, you see it with Zip, and I still look up to them, a lot. I would say fairly organic. Well, I was DJing jazz as a kid at home. I'd be the wedding DJ, I'd be playing music. Now, this is music literally from the 40s to the 90s. Prince, I'm really into Prince, MJ, Michael Jackson. There's so much incredible music out there. So DJing, aside from beat matching, was always in my life, because literally from when I was 7 years old, I would put the record on. That's the DJ character in a family. DJing started organically, I would say, after I released my first records. People bought the records. At that time, it was cool because agencies would pick you up, like I literally got scouted. Same with the distribution for records, by the way. So we made the first record without having a distributor. We just made a record, basically, and had them in our home. What do? You take the record, you go to the store and say like, hey, we made those records, you want to buy them? Cool, let me listen. One story was, that's a pretty important story until today for me, is that I would just go to the party with a promo under my arm, give those records. I would be the young guy giving the record to Margaret. The same night, Margaret plays the record. People go off. The reaction, your record is sold. The secrecy and this like, I know better tracks than you and I'm not gonna share the information, at least. You don't have to give the record away, but maybe share the information about this record. What is it? I'm an educator and I share what I've learned from the guys, so that young guys can make music and fulfill their dreams. I remember my first gig was in Switzerland. It's easy, you take a train or take an easy flight there and play at a festival somewhere in the mountains. And they were also related to this group of friends that was hanging out in Berlin, like Perlon kind of crew. So those were the kind of first gigs, and then from there it goes. And once you get picked up by an agency, things get more international. And then also a bit more career building, and it takes time. I would also recommend for anyone who's interested or currently pursuing a career as a DJ, take your time. From the first release, 2007, it took me about 5 years until I was touring internationally, but we're talking Japan, South America, North America. So those really big destinations, that stuff happens after a while. You need some years. It doesn't happen in a year. And release music consistently, then you can get to Japan. But it takes time and patience. I think at that time it was, on one hand, easier to cut through the noise because there was less noise. That's like kind of like your argument, right? Like there was less music being released, but also it wasn't depending on an algorithm that's programmed by a guy who sits in Silicon Valley. Nowadays we're all playing a game of fame that depends on an algorithm that has less to do with the music altogether. I would almost challenge that. I don't know, is there more music being released today than in the 90s? Like there's a lot of music in the 90s that was released that we have never heard of. Like underground records. 100 records being pressed, 150 records being pressed that we've never heard of. And that kind of disappeared. You can go on Discogs and find those records and barely find a copy, or if so, for very expensive. What I'm trying to say is, it's just that the noise, the context has changed, and not necessarily maybe the amount of music, and what counts has changed. In order to become a popular DJ, that has changed. What is a popular DJ in 2025 is very different than a popular DJ in 1995, you know? It was like now it's a pop star, it became mainstream. Like being a DJ and electronic musician, producer is now a mainstream thing that a lot of people strive to do. It's a paradox because the more you lean into that side, the more I think you're losing touch with what it's actually about and touch with the music. If there's anything listening to us old guys or middle-aged guys, I would recommend just focus on the music for the time being. Of course, other things matter. I will not forget what I felt when I first went to Romania to play music. I'm German. What the heck? It feels a lot like what Berlin was when I was 17. The music, I don't know, it's hard to put in words, but open-end parties. There's no restrictions. People were just playing, and when the person was tired, the next one was playing, kind of. You know, it was just like, oh, you're tired, cool, I'll play for 10 hours. And then the next one plays for 10 hours. And it's this like ultimate freedom, just having music in the front, and ravers too, and not to be in a cool city and be on a phone or something. I don't know, it was incredible. I have to say, it's still, for me, the top. Unfortunately, like politically speaking, maybe right now what's going on is difficult. I'm gonna take the chance to say that. It's every country has their difficulties from the listeners. People have attention span, they have time. It feels like they're there for 20 hours anyways. So why don't you play what's on your mind and what's on your heart? And it creates an incredible amount of freedom for us DJs or performers to do whatever the fuck we want to do. And that's a big thanks to the dancers. That's really just crowd. That's the crowd. Lets us play things that we can't play in other places on planet Earth. That's how I feel about Romania in particular. Really, a lot of respect for that particular scene. It may also be a special scene. I know there's pop, the commercial side as well in Romania. I don't know much about this, but that's why I'm loyal to my partners there, Sunrise, Catalin, by creating exactly that feeling. It's very similar to what we experience here in Berlin. Guys, stay for 20 hours, stay for as long as you want. I'm just here playing music, and that's really amazing. So lots of respect. And I do also remember seeing them DJ the first time. I think it would have been here at CDB, RPR together. And it was incredible for us to see, oh, there's people doing the same thing. Not the same, like their version of the thing in another country. I'm not surprised that that we get along. Yeah, I like talking about this stuff. This is good. That's what creates a scene, a fruitful grassroots environment for things to grow that are special. That creates all those things that are required for new artists to do incredible things. It's not just them, obviously, but they set the path. They're visionaries. They set look, we can do that, and now people are doing it. First time I played Sunwaves, it was already quite established, and I had a lot of respect. Like, it was likely one of the biggest gigs at that time for me in my life. So I was nervous, went in with confidence, but a healthy amount of curiosity. And it does something to you. I don't know if you've talked to artists like Jon Ludwig. Him and I share that. We went also the same year. We are very similar in the development. We wrote music together, releasing on each other's labels and stuff. Every time we're at Sunwaves, we talk about this. Do you remember the first time? It's a little bit like that first time does something to you. Kind of what we talked about before, what the people offer you, the space that they offer you to play unreleased things that you wouldn't be able to play anywhere else. All that freedom does some pretty crazy shit with you. This is my job. I studied musician and became a producer, and I had to rely on making my income and feeding my child with this. So when the pandemic hit, it was a pretty big hit. That's both good and tragic. Good in a way for me because I started an academy. So that has changed my trajectory drastically. Wow, and I could say so much about this change. I also became a father at the same time, and I take those personal things seriously. I like to show up for my kid or my family. So I started teaching, basically offering courses and panels and discussions, and venturing also a little bit into the NFT and crypto space to some degree, and just kind of looking at where things are heading, kind of experimenting during those years of the pandemic. I noticed that there's a hypercharged, like everyone's hyper anxious to become famous very quickly, and that scared me. And the greed in the music industry really scares me. In seeing what some really, really, really big DJs are making, what kind of fees they're making by playing the music of artists and producers that are not getting paid for their music. So you make a killer track, and it's being played by someone really famous. They get paid $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 per gig, and the bedroom producer gets the fee from Spotify. Yeah, and it does have an impact on me. We've lost very, very good DJs who've just said like, sorry mate, I'm not into this anymore. I'm not vibing with this kind of thing where everyone's just looking at how do I get big very quickly and forgetting where the music's actually coming from, and that is right here. Right here. That's where it's coming from. And I know, what we're doing here is like looking more at the underground, but there is a big overground part of this music industry. There is a lot of money being made and a lot of money being passed around. It's unfair, it's unequal, and it's based on human phenomenon like greed, and it's like it becomes a political conversation. So another aspect that I've been expanding is the engineering, which I'm very happy about because it sharpens my skills. So mixing engineer has a lot more impact, and that's what I'm doing a lot these days, helping people mix their stuff and also coach them at various depths, I would say, and help them finish their records, which is not just mixing, but sometimes also arranging or things like that. But DeWalta.com, you can literally go there straight away and contact me to what extent I might be able to help you to get your product better, to release it. My next step is I'm actually kind of relaunching everything. Our label took a break for 3 years. So I'm relaunching right now and also kind of restructuring the label, changing distributions. I'm looking into supporting more new talent, trying to find new talent. It was nice to use the academy. I have clients now, students from all over the world, from Australia to South America, Iran, in the Middle East. There's a lot of movement happening in the Middle East, which is amazing. So seeing all that new talent pop up in areas where maybe electronic music was literally forbidden and it's now coming, that's where you see that grassroots again. It's very interesting. Very good potential for me to support on the label. So I'm looking into extending that, and then also playing more again because of private family circumstances. Also parts of it being mental health, because there's a fine line between escapism and a healthy amount of hedonism. A lot of the stuff that we talked about Berlin in the early days was, I would say, healthy hedonism in terms of in the context of art. Some of the stuff today is escapism that can be toxic. So right now I'm working on remixes. I have a bunch of edits that I want to put out. I'm working on an album that's going to be a bit more eclectic, some crazy sound design stuff that I'm really into. I don't know if people are going to enjoy it. I don't care. Quite frankly, I'm just putting out what I think is necessary for the world. I'm trying to kind of get back into following the old paradigm, going back to how things felt in 2010 and apply that to 2025. Stay curious, stay hungry. Curiosity is where it's at. If you ask questions, then you learn. How does this module do? What is the difference between a wavetable oscillator and a DCO, a digital controlled oscillator, or a VCO, voltage controlled oscillator? What is control voltage? What is a gate? Ask question. What does headroom mean? Study that stuff. And really getting into the thick of it is what makes you a great artist in the long run. The world has a lot to offer that comes to you. If you run after things, it's more likely that you won't catch them. Very likely we won't get it. But if we just create an environment for something to happen, the good shit will happen.